like to welcome you and introduce myself. My name is André Leu, and I'm the International Director of Regeneration International. And we have 4 panelists at the moment. Precious Phiri from Zimbabwe, Claudia Shep from Germany, and Oliver Gardiner from France. So I'd like to start first with Precious Phiri. And Precious is our Africa manager for Regeneration International, but she's also works with Savory Africa, and Precious is an expert on holistic management in regenerative grazing systems, especially here in Africa. So, Precious, I'd like to give the floor to you. And Oliver, if you could bring up Precious' presentation, please.
Thank you, Andre. Bonsoir, everybody. The COP15 is based on from scarcity to prosperity. So I think there is nothing more relevant. I'll first of all like to share about at least a bit about myself. I'm inspired by all the natural patterns that surround us, and as a daughter of the soil, a daughter of Africa, I'm inspired also by nature's gifts. I'm inspired by family and the potential that we have in regeneration if we as humans really partner with nature. I'm also a smallholder farmer and an educator in holistic management. We can move to the next slide. So I know the term climate change, we are all aware of it, and there's a bit of issue on is it the cause of our challenges or it's a feedback of our actions. But I believe in that it's a dance of both, and in most cases, the climate crisis that we have is really attached to how we manage our animals, our resources, and make decisions on how we interact with our natural systems and patterns. So it is a feedback which we do not love, but our actions tend to give us that feedback. And in other issues, these pictures that you are seeing are showing across the African landscape, I'm sure, and across the Asian landscapes and any other landscape where there's drylands. In one region of the same country, you can have a drought and people having crops failing massively, and in another, a cyclone can cause displacement of communities and flooding. And then another picture is a group of beautiful women in the northern part of Kenya, the Samburu communities, who are standing on soil that is not covered, which is losing lots of water whenever it rains. And that picture really probably resembles about 2/3 of Africa right now. That's how much desertification is going on and land degradation. And farmers who are farming in these landscapes are up against a big, big challenge, because they are not only challenged by the climatic conditions, but also social and economic conditions. We can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to be sharing a bit about the journey of using the holistic management framework, which is one of our regenerative tools that we really value so much in the network of Regeneration International. So holistic management is really a decision-making process that helps us be aware of complexities of the systems that we manage. So for example, the understanding that every time you make an action, nature tends to reorganize itself. So you do get feedback. And so using holistic management helps us to really manage the dynamics that are involved with whole systems. And the key insights of holistic management are these, which I find very important. They're like your key principles, if you will. So nature functions in wholes. That means we cannot exactly afford to manipulate parts. So as a land manager, your question is, how can I contribute? How can I be part of this land that I'm managing? And then there's what we call brittleness. brittleness is the spread of moisture across the year. So that means, for example, we are here in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. I notice there is rain almost any time. It's moist and humid all the time. And that cannot be compared, for example, to some parts of the Sahel even, or a Zimbabwean land in a dry land. So the tools that you need there are different. And then in grazing, which is one of the most important tools of holistic management, time is of more importance than numbers. So overgrazing to a certain extent is not necessarily the number of animals that you put to a land, but how much time do you give to grass plants to recover before animals go back, especially in the growing season. And then another thing is what we call predator-prey relationship. Holistic management, the framework was coined by my mentor, Alan Savory, who was studying the patterns in the wilderness when he worked in the African bushes. So holistic management mimics the behavior of wild, large animals that you see in that first picture, the zebras, the wildebeest, who keep moving around, being moved by lions, hyena, and then when they have hunting animals around them, these large grazers are impacted and their behavior changes. So that action of them grouping together, dunging and urinating, you can't stay around your poop and your urine for a long time, so you move away, right? Do we agree? Yes. And so when they go away, what happens to the land that they've left behind in the growing season, which it could be a season that's warm and rainy, that place recovers. That's how our African rangelands mostly evolved with wildlife, and I think in many other parts of the world. So now we bring the tool of livestock and the creativity of the human mind. We use livestock to then recreate the rangelands that we had using holistic management. We can go. And this is mainly to just improve ecosystem processes. And believe it or not, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much joy you feel in your heart, when the source of your prosperity is not dependent on natural patterns, it's likely to deplete and finish, right? So we are interested in helping ourselves get ecological literacy so that we know that when our land is well and covered, we know we have solar energy flow, we can use the sun's energy, which is free, and grow our grass and grow our animals and grow our crops and feed ourselves. You improve your water cycle when your land is covered, you slow down flooding and capture water. You have no drying boreholes because you have water underground, and you also improve the soil mineral cycle, and you have a dynamic and diverse ecosystem through what we call the community dynamics. Next slide. And so my work really involves using participatory tools to create visions and plans for communities. You know, it's easy to get into a place where you can say, I'll grow a garden, I will plant grazing, we want boreholes, we want dams. But I think the most important thing is to go through a process. I think even here as well, why do we do what we want to do? And you involve the important persons who are people who are facing these things on a daily, and you connect with them and you start your trainings. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm just showing those pictures. This is so that you can improve ecosystems. This is why we do this. You also have to design context-specific tools. So there's no copy and paste. No matter how much you like what I'm wearing, it will never fit perfectly on you because we're different. And I think that's what we need to understand about the environments that we manage. And then you also create just relations between the people and all living things. And you create an abundant mindset, and you create a mindset of community. That's what we are about, ecological, economic, and social values coming back. And then there's always continual growth, and innate potential of every place can be brought out if you follow these principles. Let's go. And so here is a picture of one of our tools. Again, I brought the picture of wildlife, and then we use the tool of animals. I don't know if the picture shows very well, but you can see the impact of livestock or those cattle. You can do this with sheep, camels. It's all in the planning and how diligent you are about where you move. So you can see how much they've impacted the ground. We can go to the next slide. And this planning doesn't happen on our heads because you are managing many things at the same time. Imagine in most African landscapes, you have wildlife. You have wildlife in terms of buffalo that eat the same grass as cattle. You then have lions, for example. So you cannot keep it in your head only to say, oh, no, I'm in paddock 5. But holistic grazing planning is intricately planned. Sorry about that, that's English running away. You plan it so diligently so that you don't miss possible challenges or possible opportunities for you to impact a certain land portion. So, for example, you cannot just say, oh, I'm in paddock 5. But why are you in paddock 5? And for what reason? For how long? And what else are you aware of? Or what improvements need to happen on that land? And this is just a map drawn by hand, but it doesn't stop you from drawing it by Google Earth so that you have something more intensive. And yeah, let's go. And one of the most important things that I spoke about earlier is what we call recovery. I love this slide because it shows what happens to the grass plant when you overexpose it to grazing, especially when you're supposed to rapidly grow. If you look at the picture at the bottom there, that is grass literally running away from the mouth of animals. So grass plants can show you that they've been overgrazed, and then it informs you as a farmer to then move. We can go to the next one. And this is a picture of some of the rangelands that I work with in one of the communities. In one rainfall season, they determined to make sure that they create a growth opportunity. So you may have a successive strategy. Sometimes you grow much more grass, and then over time you also diversify in species because you want broad-leaved plants that will feed all your animals. And this is so that these animals can have lots of food in the non-growing season. And later on today, as we're going to be learning, in the non-growing season, then that's when you can also introduce your agave agroforestry so that you also boost the nutrition of the forage that your animals access so that you have good condition all year round. We can go to the next slide. And these are just communal photos for you to just feast and maybe have an appreciation of where I come from in Zimbabwe. These farmers are so determined, strong leadership. The man in a white hat, they call him, he is the whip of the community, and he is the guardian of that land. And he's so determined to see this land heal to be a story globally. We can go to another one. And then this is a story from Samburu, which most of us identify with. You know, we have different kinds of conflict because of land degradation, and Samburu has lots of gun violence as many other parts of our African continent, right? So we did some trainings in 2019 with them, and this is some of the photos that they monitor every year, and they share with us, which is really amazing, so we get to see their results. We can go to the next. And we are also into healing croplands and seed saving so that farmers are not only food secure, but they also have food sovereignty, which is control over how and how they preserve seeds using the indigenous knowledge systems. And from there, we also showcase the seeds and we celebrate them. And this happens across the African continent, and many partners do this. So this is just but a small portion. And then there is a soil example that we're sharing. The white soil is sandy and nothing grows on it. But after biological impact or animal impact, you get your rich soil. You can look at the crops. This is 2021, 2022 cropping season. And the farmers that are resilient, you include diverse crops, including cover crops, so that you don't lose too much moisture because the rains are also very unreliable. And you can tell that one will be better than the other in the end. We can go to the next one. And so that's it. Thank you very much. I hope to connect with you after this.
Thank you, Precious. We'll have a question session after all the speakers have finished. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Claudia Shep. And Claudia is the coordinator for the 4 for 1,000 project. And for me, this is actually one of the most important projects on the planet. It originated in the Paris climate change meetings in 2015. And in the beginning, around 30 countries signed it, and different other organizations. And the whole idea is to change agriculture. At the moment, agriculture is responsible for creating, depending on how you measure it, up to 50% of the world's greenhouse gases. The object of the 4 for 1,000 is to do like what Precious was showing, which is where you can actually increase soil carbon, and that gives multiple benefits. For instance, improving fertility, improving water holding capacity, water capture, and equally as important, we can actually take that carbon out of the atmosphere and we can reverse climate change. Where the 4 for 1,000 comes from is that scientists in France worked out if we could change agriculture so that we could increase the amount of carbon in the soil by 4 parts per 1,000, we could negate all the greenhouse gases we are putting into the atmosphere. And that shows that we could actually turn climate change around. And this is why this is such an important project. And for me, it's very, very important because when I was president of IFOAM Organics International, I was signature number 6 on that document. And it's one of the reasons why we in Regeneration International will continue to support this. And we're really pleased to see that it is growing. More and more organizations, more and more countries are joining this important initiative. And so I'll hand it over to Claudia now to give you more information, and especially about where the 4 for 1,000 initiative is up to now.
Yes, thank you very much, André, for this really nice introduction. Let me say we're really happy to be here today, and especially about this partnership with Regeneration International, because as you just said, we share the same passion for healthy soils and for healthy land. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. So I was just saying that we're sharing the passion for healthy soils and healthy land with Regeneration International, and that's why we're so happy about this partnership and about being here tonight. So let me just, well, give you some very brief information about 4 for 1,000, because I think the basic principle was already introduced by André. I think, well, so our ambition is to reach healthy soils for food security as well as climate change adaptation and mitigation by actually transforming the agricultural production system towards more regenerative and agroecological practices. And we're very happy that this year we actually managed to finalize our implementation strategy. That was a very long process with all our members and friends and partners involved to actually phrase what we want to reach and where we want to go as an initiative. So maybe just very briefly, let me give you the 4 main points of that strategic plan. So for one, of course, one of our aims is advocacy. So we have to make sure that soil health is actually recognized in all relevant policies. So be it at the local level, be it at the national or international level, be it within the 3 Rio Conventions, we have to make sure soil health is there. But at the same time, we cannot only focus at the political level. We also need to consider the entire value chain. So we have to start with the producers on the ground, make them transform their practices towards agroecology. But we also have to make sure that the enabling environment is given. So we have to address the food industry as well as the consumers who are at the other end of this chain somehow, to change their behavior and actually go for agroecologically produced food items. So this is one. So how can we reach this? I think the foundation for this is really to educate people, to make people aware of the importance of soils, and to make them understand how precious this resource is we are having there. Okay, so the second big pillar is to promote relevant researches, so really to make all stakeholders interact to see like which research is needed, what do practitioners need to know, what do politicians need to know, and to have these people interact and move forward in that direction. And the third pillar with we want to support is the exchange amongst the practitioners on the ground. So like peer-to-peer exchange, so share best practices, share lessons learned, like what are others doing. And I'm very happy we're hearing about this agave project later, because I think that's a great example which really fits to our mission as well. So maybe, yes, so we have this very active community of practice, so we would be very happy to all of you who are here today to join this community of practice and get into that exchange. And maybe just as a last point, let me announce that in June we have our virtual fair happening again. And that's a very nice opportunity for you to see other actors in your field from your region, from your thematic focus, see what they are doing, share, and actually start developing coalitions and alliances to really implement the strategy which is leading the 4per1000 initiative now. So with that, I think we have a very short greeting word from our Executive Secretary, Paul Leu, who wants to address you in French. So I will lead this virtual floor to him now, and I'm happy to take your questions later. Thank you.
Chers participants à cet événement organisé par Regeneration International dans le contexte de la COP15 de l'UNCCD, je vous prie de m'excuser de m'adresser à vous de la sorte par l'intermédiaire de cette vidéo enregistrée, mais je ne peux malheureusement être présent avec vous aujourd'hui en raison d'engagements pris antérieurement. Je suis néanmoins de tout cœur avec vous pour défendre la cause vitale de la santé des sols de notre planète. Je souhaite souligner 3 points importants à l'occasion de mon court propos. Premièrement, il est indispensable que toutes les conventions internationales des Nations Unies, issues de la conférence de Rio de 1992, nommément la Convention cadre sur le changement climatique, la Convention sur la diversité biologique et bien sûr la Convention de lutte contre la désertification, prennent la juste mesure de l'importance de la santé des sols comme point de départ crucial de leurs actions. L'année 2022, soit exactement 30 ans après leur création, est une année particulière qui voit s'organiser les 3 conférences des parties de ces 3 conventions majeures, respectivement à Sharm el-Sheikh, à Kunming et à Abidjan. Faisons collectivement en sorte que cette année 2022 soit l'année où la santé des sols fasse partie intégrante de l'agenda de ces 3 conventions sœurs. Deuxièmement, il est important de souligner le travail fait au plan local et international par Regeneration International, partenaire historique de l'initiative 4 pour 1000. J'en veux pour preuve le développement au Mexique de nouveaux systèmes agroforestiers et d'élevage basés sur l'agave, des légumineuses arborescentes telles que mesquite, ainsi que des ovins et des caprins. Ces systèmes, développés avec Rancho Via Organica et la municipalité de San Miguel de Allende, permettront demain de reverdir des zones désertiques en redonnant des revenus aux agriculteurs et en luttant contre les changements climatiques grâce à la séquestration d'importantes quantités de carbone au-dessus et dans les sols. Nous avons besoin de tels projets innovants issus de l'expérience et le savoir-faire des populations locales, mais pour cela, nous avons besoin que de telles activités soient soutenues et accompagnées financièrement à leur juste valeur. Et ce sera mon 3e et dernier point. Qu'il s'agisse de Régénération Internationale pour ses nombreuses actions sur le terrain en parfait accord avec les agriculteurs, les éleveurs et les forestiers, des pays en développement, ou que ce soit l'initiative 4 pour 1000, qui, grâce à ses 700 partenaires et membres, promeut l'importance de la séquestration du carbone dans les sols du monde entier, via le développement de pratiques agroécologiques, nous avons un besoin crucial de financement et de soutien. Merci aux financeurs internationaux et nationaux de considérer le soutien aux acteurs que nous sommes, ainsi qu'à tous ceux qui œuvrent à redonner l'espoir en l'avenir et à nous permettre de transmettre aux générations futures des sols vivants et riches en carbone, pour maintenir un climat favorable à la vie sur Terre et garantir les récoltes de demain. Je vous souhaite à toutes et à tous un grand moment de partage et de découverte grâce à nos amis de Regeneration International.
So we'll go to the next speaker, who happens to actually be the last speaker, Oliver Gardiner. Oliver, as some of you might have guessed, is our video maker and he's a communications manager. On top of that, he also manages Eurasia, Asia, and Europe for Regeneration International. Oliver is an excellent filmmaker and video maker, and he's been up all night. As you can see, he hasn't had time to shave. And he's produced this video. So Oliver, I'll hand it over to you, and you can introduce it and tell everybody what it's about.
Thank you. Yes, so Regeneration International, they have a sister organization called Via Organica in central Mexico, in San Miguel de Allende, which is a beautiful UNESCO city. And this is one of the, so this is where agave grows. Yeah. And so here we work with farmers and ranchers that use agave. So agave is traditionally used for producing a drink called aguamiel, which is what you make agave syrup with. But you can also make a fermented drink called pulque, and of course mezcal and tequila. But here we're going to be talking about a completely different product, and that is very low-cost animal feed that is very beneficial for dryland herders. And so we know that agave grows not just in Mexico, but in all of the drylands of the world. We call it the bamboo of the dryland. And here what they do is that they use it as an animal feed, very low cost, and it can be a real solution for all those areas across the Sahel, in the Maghreb, where you have animals that are dying, animals that have skin on bone. Here we have a real solution to feed them, and a solution for animals in the grasslands, a solution for the periods of years where the forage is very low. Here we have a solution that can be combined with other trees that are traditionally used for fodder, such as Phytherbia albida. When you combine nitrogen-fixing trees and the agave, the nitrogen from these trees, so mesquite or Phytherbia albida, will accelerate the growth of the agave plant and enables the plant to sequester large amounts of carbon. And that unlocks a whole bunch of potential to rehydrate landscapes, but also can be economically interesting for farmers because you could potentially create carbon credits from that. Well, that's things we're going to go into further on. But we'll look at the video now. So we got the farmers excited. We said, well, look, we're going to be talking about you at the UN. They couldn't come here because they're really busy working. They can't just leave their farm like that. So what's amazing today is that farmers all have cameras, and they sent us their testimonials, they sent us their stories. Very last minute, we were getting the last ones last night at 5 p.m. So I took the initiative to do a lot of editing all night long. And so here they're going to give us their side of the story.
Siempre que nosotros tengamos una planta de maguey, pues vamos a ver un ingreso, ¿verdad?
Y que no requiere fertilizantes o riego.
Sino que la plantas y ahí mismo pues ella se adapta.
Las borregas también para los ganados sí sirven bastante.
El billón de agaves genera economía para campesinos y campesinas.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Los saludo desde el proyecto de Vía Orgánica en San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato. Es una estrategia que pretende cambiar de alguna manera cómo se ve el paisaje semiárido degradado. Una estrategia que pretende volver los ojos al maguey nuevamente y verlo como una planta realmente aliada ante la crisis climática.
Es una planta que captura CO2 del ambiente, que además es refugio de flora y fauna silvestre y que retiene los suelos.
Una planta que asociada con especies de leguminosas se vuelve una planta que resiste los climas semiáridos, que se adapta, que se vuelve productiva.
Aquí tenemos lo que son asociados el maguey con varias plantas. Tenemos las moras, que se alcanzan a ver por ahí al final. Tenemos olivos y pues también tenemos asociados lo que son los animales, las gallinas, de repente también algunos conejos que andan por ahí. Entonces no necesita de mayor espacio tampoco, podemos asociarlo con diferentes plantas.
Nos da diferentes beneficios como alimento, como material para construcción, como forraje para los animales.
Por beneficio de la gente, mucha gente aquí, los de las comunidades, tienen sus huertos de maguey, ¿verdad? Porque no vamos a gastar en comprar forraje para nuestros animales porque nosotros ya lo tenemos. Pues es una invitación a que todos pongamos nuestro... Aquí Vía Orgánica tiene su máquina preparada para moler forraje. Se muele, se envasa en botes de 20 litros, que son 20 kilos. Se deja 28 días. A los 28 días se les da el forraje que es a chivas, borregas, reses y gallinas, cerdo.
Thank you, Oliver. Appreciate that. So now I'll introduce the next speaker. That's me. So I've already introduced myself. I'm André Leu. I'm the International Director of Regeneration International. My wife Julia and I we're farmers in Australia. But what I want to talk about is what the last video was about, which is the agave agroforestry system. So if you could bring up the slides, please. The actual project's called the Billion Agave Project, and this has actually been started in the central part of Mexico, which is a high desert area. Next slide, please. And where this is really important is that according to the United Nations Convention for Combating Desertification, that's the organization that's holding this event, approximately 40% of the world's land, which is 14 billion hectares, 4 billion hectares, is composed of deserts and drylands, mostly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And over 2 billion people are dependent on these areas. And it supplies actually about 60% of the world's food production. And yet, these are some of the most degraded areas on the planet. Next picture, please. The whole idea of the Billion Agave Project is to actually start looking at how we can regenerate these types of arid ecosystems. And it's really started by farmers and actually farmer scientists in the high desert area in the center of Mexico. Now it's spreading across Mexico. Next slide, please. This system is actually based on the natural ecosystem in this area, which is agave, which as you can see is the cactus-like plant, and then mesquite, which is a legume, a nitrogen-fixing tree. There are other trees, acacias and other nitrogen trees in the system. What is interesting about this agroforestry system, it's based on endemic native species. And it makes a highly, in other words, what we're doing is replicating the natural ecosystem in this area and then intensifying it and using it to regenerate the landscape. Next slide, please. Now, agaves have been traditionally used, as Oliver said, to make alcoholic drinks. The pulque, which is like best way to say is like a beer, and then the spirits, mezcal and tequila. And the sugary sap was collected either from the base of the leaves or from the stem, what they call the piña. However, after they collected that, the bulk of the leaves, the bulk of the stem fibre was thrown away because it was regarded as inedible for livestock because it has these compounds called lectins. Next slide, please. This gentleman in the sunglasses, Dr. Juan Frias Hernandez, is a scientist farmer, looked at if you actually fermented these leaves, the fermentation removes the lectins and then they become nutritious and palatable silage. Next slide, please. The thing is about agaves, they require no irrigation. They can actually store the seasonal rainfall. They can also capture the humidity in the air and store it in their leaves. So it doesn't even have to rain. And even when we think it's really dry, there's actually moisture in the air. They capture it, they store it. So they can grow and produce huge amounts of biomass even under prolonged drought. They're an exceptional plant for that. Very few plants can do what they can do. Next slide, please. The mesquite, and can I say that every ecosystem has similar trees to mesquite. These are, grow well in arid areas. They have very, very deep roots that will go down and find water. They can, grow down, 30, 40 meters deep and actually find permanent water. They are legume trees, so they fix nitrogen, so that improves the fertility. But anything that fixes nitrogen also provides high protein food, which is very important for stock. However, they have thorns, a bit like the prickly acacias here in Africa actually is for me, the similar sort of plant. Some animals can eat them, others can't. What they found is by finally chopping them up and fermenting them now that they could become very nutritious, high-protein stock feed. These are actually really valuable ones in droughts because you can actually harvest these leaves, ferment them, and you've got fodder in the really dry times. Next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce you here to Ronnie Cummings. Ronnie is the one who actually met with these farmers and realised the potential of what they were doing and came up with the concept of the Billion Agave Project to scale this up around Mexico, and actually versions of this can be scaled up in arid areas all around the world. The whole idea is that we have a high biomass, high forage yielding system that works well even on degraded and semi-arid lands. Really importantly, it produces when we ferment it, it produces large amounts of high quality but inexpensive, cheap silage as animal fodder. So much cheaper than buying fodder. Next slide, please. Just to show you the process here, what happens is, the agave leaves are harvested, and you can also harvest the branches and leaves of the mesquite or acacia, and then it will get chopped up, and then it's put into sealed containers. Next slide. You can see the sealed containers where they're airtight, and that's how you make silage, by fermenting it. And by fermenting it now, it makes it palatable and high quality. It can be stored for a year, which means it can be used as supplementary stock feed. Next slide. What they're doing here, which is really important now, is in really dry time, when there's a low amount of forage, that's when animals will do the damage to pasture. They can actually take the animals off, rest the pasture. This is what Precious was talking about. The real important thing with any pasture is time management and then recovery. Allowing the pasture to recover, getting the animals off. You have the ability with this now, in the driest time of year, to pen the animals, take them off the pasture, let the pasture recover, wait for the rains to come, and they do not lose condition, because this is cheap, high quality, high protein silage. So it's win-win. Animals keep condition, and we do not degenerate the pasture. We can allow it to regenerate. Next slide, please. So I just want to show you how these systems are planted out now. These are looking at dense plantings of the agaves, which is 2,000 a hectare, and then actually in this one we'll have 400 mesquite trees, but you could have 400 acacia trees in this one. This is at Rancho Villa Organica in San Miguel. Next slide, please. And just to show you how to do it, it's very easy how to propagate agaves. Agaves get young suckers off the side. They call them hijuelos. But you can just take those off. At the end of their life, they seed, and they're easy to take from seedlings. So you either take them from the young suckers, just like you take banana plants, or, very easy, or the seeds. Okay, no, it's all right. Yeah, next slide. Now with the, in this case, the mesquites, like a lot of these trees in arid areas, they're very slow growing from seed, and to speed it up, they do what we call marcotting, where you just find a suitable branch, you take part of the bark off, you put a fibrous potting mix, moist around it, tie it off with plastic, and you'll see the roots grow. Next slide. That gets cut off, and they get potted up in a nursery and until they're healthy, and then they get planted out in the rainy season. So so they have time to grow. But what I wanted to do is show the difference here. You can see that these marcots, the ones in the pots, they're only 3 months old, and they're bigger than Dr. Juan Frias there. But in his hand, he's got a 2-year-old seedling in a pot. So you can see the amount of time we can save by doing this and getting the trees up quickly. Next slide, please. What we do, really important when you first plant it, is to we use no-till systems. You don't use Roundup or any chemicals on it. We like to sow it with native pasture grasses, because actually what we want is for this to be part of holistic management. The animals can actually graze the grasses for most of the year and just have the agave and mesquite silage in the dry season. But when you first plant it out, you need to rest it, and you need to allow the agaves and mesquites to grow up to such a level that the young plants won't be damaged by grazing animals. Next slide, please. But as they grow, what you can do with the agaves, you can take the bottom leaves off. Now, there's 20% of the biomass every year as they grow. And this actually produces tons of forage. So from about year 3, you start to produce tons of forage per hectare every year forever in the system. Next slide, please. The other one I think is really important, and Oliver mentioned it, and we'll talk about the issue of, when we talk about 4 for 1,000, the whole issue of reversing climate change. This particular system This is peer-reviewed scientific research by Hudson Carbon, shows that the 2,000 agave plants per hectare and the 400 mesquite trees, after about 10 to 15 years, will sequester about 143 metric tons of carbon dioxide per hectare per year. Now, we want to also eventually see farmers being paid that money per tonne. At the moment, you know, put it in another way, carbon's worth about $50 per metric tonne. That's a lot of money. 100 metric tonnes that farmers can start earning just from the carbon on top of everything else. Plus, we can start reversing climate change. Next slide. So I just want to end with this, is that this system can be modified for any arid or semi-arid ecosystem on all our continents. Because all our continents, we have native drought-resistant trees. You know, for instance, here in Africa, Fiderbia is a classic one. Then all the acacias, then we can talk about Sesbanias and Albizzias. You know, Africa is just rich in these species. We've got hundreds we can play with. And then other continents. Plus, various agave species are already naturalized here. They're naturalized on every continent, you know. They're already here. So we can make systems that are, say, endemic and unique to Africa. Like Precious was saying before, we don't paste and copy. We build systems that are unique for every part, even in different parts of different countries. You know, the same country, we have different climates. And the other thing we can do is put cover crops in to increase the fertility and the productivity. Last slide, please. So by implementing these restoration and agroforestry systems, we can regenerate arid landscapes. We can improve the health and productivity of their livestock. Really important, and provide affordable food for families and improve their livelihoods. That's one of the most important things we're talking about, particularly here, where, you know, rural people are the lowest socioeconomic group. Actually, it's the same everywhere in the world. And, you know, this is about, how can I say, economic justice as well. And we can deliver valuable ecosystem services, reduce soil erosion, recharge water tables, and like I said, we can also sequester, start reversing climate change and bring the climate back. So I'll end with that and say thank you, merci beaucoup. We've got some links there if you want to find out more about it, and I think we're happy to open it up to questions.
I'd just like to...
You want to show one slide?
I'd just like to... Yeah, I'd just like to... this is taken in Ethiopia, in Amara region. The two women in front are planting trees on a large-scale reforestation project. But as you can see behind, there's an agave plant, and you can see the amount of biomass you have there. And in this area, the livestock is really thin, skin on bones, and there's a good 4 months of the year where they really suffer from drought. Areas that are deforested, the animals do not have any shade, so they'll die in the sun. And that plant there is just sitting there. But all they'd need is a machine and a few buckets, and they could keep their livestock alive. So just a bit of food for thought. And that you can see this happening in many other places throughout the world.
You know, please feel free to ask any of us questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, please. Yeah.
Let me start by expressing our appreciation for the job you've done, researchers in different parts, in these 3 parts of the world, Eurasia, Asia, and Europe. Well, what we were discussing with our colleagues is that we have that particular variety in Africa. Or rather, let's start off properly by introducing ourselves. I am Yusuf Mainabakar, Dr. Yusuf Mainabakar, the Director General of National Agency for the Great Green Wall.
Okay, I am Usman Ino Abubakar from Great Green Wall, Nigeria.
Great Green Wall? Actually, I know, we've met before in Morocco. I remember I know who you are now, and it's lovely. Thank you for being here.
I am Dr. Abdulhamid Taher. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Global Environmental and Climate Conservation Initiative. I'm from Nigeria also.
Okay, thank you very much for the fantastic display. My name is Musa Ibrahim. I am the Land Bureau of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification in Nigeria.
As an agency responsible for planting of trees in the 11 frontline states of Nigeria, starting from Sokoto to Borno State, including 2 states of Bauchi, Gombe, and Adamawa states, we usually plant trees. And when he was mentioning mesquite, it reminds of the gum arabic tree, which we can use together with that particular variety in Mexico, the one that is used to make tequila. It is fleshy compared to that one, I believe, and it has more economic values. So I think I would like to start by saying we are officially inviting you to Nigeria to serve as partners, and we can collaborate. We have the lands, we have the acacia plantation that are already secured, although it doesn't need much water, like you've said, but we do have some solar-operated bowls that could supplement for the gum arabic by the side. Ethiopia are where they are today because they started planting about 30 years ago, not just overnight, and the likes of Niger Republic as well. And we like to quote that Chinese saying that says the best time to plant trees was like 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. It is not too late, and we're inviting you to Nigeria officially to partner with us so that you could implement your project. Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for the invitation, and I'll give you my card and we can start talking about this process. I very much look forward to how we can work together.
Yes,
and
to emphasize on this, what we need from you are the seedlings. We will take care of the planting and everything involved.
Yeah.
That is the assistance that we want from you. We have that particular species, but we don't have that agave, the one that is used to make a tequila with it officially. So that is what we're expecting from you. We have the lands that are already secured and protected. We're going to provide you with every logistics that you're going to need. We're not asking for anything other than the seedlings. And thank you very much. In some of the slides, he has equally shown how it is easy to propagate them. So we're delighted to see that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can I say thank you, Nigeria? Like our international director, Dr. André Leu said, it would be amazing to then continue to plan so that we get a better appreciation of your landscape, your climate, what variables are present, as we specifically said that this is an agroforestry system, so that we also learn what other plants can we combine with your agave plantations, and to see how possible it is to even scale up going forward. So I think all the details will come into that, and we appreciate your openness and really to just jump in. It's really amazing. Thank you. Yeah, and so.
Really, as my Director General has said, we really need your presence in Nigeria. Actually, we have a lot of animals grazing our environment, and they really need feed to survive. So actually, this kind of agave project will be of importance to us. We really appreciate if it will be practiced on our land. Thank you.